Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 133. And we have Aaron Bock of Opkalla joining us.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
Hey, and look at this. I mean, yeah, you guys are in for a treat. He's got the geeky t-shirt. He's got the high-tech everything. You know, tell me you didn't. We won't reveal the entire t-shirt to you. And if anybody can guess what the remainder part of his long t-shirt is, but it's very geeky, and you're going to have to think cybersecurity. Tell me you didn't. And then if you get that right, Jack Santaniello is going to give you a free gift card courtesy of Shoemaker Law. I love giving away Starbucks cards that have Shoemaker Law on them. So anyway, Jack Santaniello is back, as well as Evan Taylor, formerly FBI cybercrimes guy, but also he's still in the cyber world and cybersecurity world in the insurance space. So you're going to want to hear him. He's finishing up another call, so he will come on live in a bit, I bet. So what I'm going to do in the meantime, so this is week 133. I'm going to remind everybody, please. Oh, there's Mr. Taylor. Robert Mayetta. Oh, why would I? Why would I not be surprised? So can you see this, Aaron? Do you see that? Yep. Did he get it right?
He did.
Okay, Robert Mayetta. Oh gosh. Well, it pays to be on these calls for 133 weeks in a row. So Robert Mayetta, you know, you are a testimony of consistency and perseverance.
Robert, I'm just going to send you preload you with like 5 prizes, so that way I don't have to do it every week.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'll tell you this too before I kick it over to Jack. Evan Taylor is on. We're excited to have him on here. I would be wearing an FBI hat, but I have to wear child's size because I have a peanut head. And Evan Taylor hasn't ever given me one. So that's why I'm not wearing my FBI hat. So just busted your chops, Evan. So good to see you. Jack, I know we've got some kind of current events that we need to hit first. First of all, tax brackets are being adjusted based on inflation. That's not supposedly here, but it's here.
Yes, definitely. And I had the, let's see, I had the thing up and then I lost it. Where is it? All right, hold on one second. Because I think having the graphic representation, right? Let me share it. Found it. All right, can you not yet? How about now? Okay, you guys see that? Yep. Okay, yep. So I can't take credit for the compilation, but BGW can take credit for sending it to me. So, because I was looking for it yesterday to be able to share with all of you today. And so here it is. And so you can go to ntu.org and find it yourself, but it basically is comparing what the income brackets are for 2022 income, and then what the brackets are going to be in 2023. So my understanding is that, you know, they are as they are for this year's income. So don't think that these numbers here are the new numbers that would apply to the tax returns that you're filing for 2022 income. So this is really what you're filing in 2024 for your 23 income. And so it goes through, I think, pretty accurately, or I think pretty in depth as to what those brackets are in comparison between the two and what the differential is. The someone had asked me when I presented this internally to my partners, on the gift tax returns, have those numbers changed? Those haven't been published for 23, but I did, in doing the research, find that it went from $15,000 per person in 21 to $16,000 per person. And so, and there are some exceptions, like your spouse doesn't count as a person if you give that your spouse a gift, and there's other exceptions that I'm not qualified to speak on, but so these are the numbers, and they go through obviously single, married, jointly. Standard deduction also is changing. So take a look at that for your curiosity. But again, my understanding is that it does not apply to your income for this year. So therefore not to be a part of your 22 filing that should occur in April of 23 or extended if you need the extension. So there's that. In other news, so I've been following this proposed independent contractor rule change. And the reason being is this would significantly affect the franchise industry. Franchisees are independent contractors of franchisors. And there has been a push on various levels to make the franchisor the employer of franchisees, but also the franchisees' employees. Now, the franchisee employees has failed. You may remember that case with McDonald's where guy through a drive-through window spills super hot coffee on his lap, gets injured, gets burned. And the lawsuit was not only against that franchisee operator, but it was also against the franchisor. And the franchisor was dismissed from that case, but after having spent a lot of money defending, but that thought process is continuing because the franchisor controls, in quotes, what the franchisee is supposed to do, but that's the nature of franchising. So I represent both franchisors and franchisees. I see it both ways, but I mean, for them to make this change is significant, not only in the franchise industry, but also just generally speaking, for gig workers or anybody else, because now you have additional expenses of workers' comp and all the other things that come with a true employee being brought on board. In other news, there was a report, this was in the Business Journal, that there is increasing delinquency in PPP loans, meaning payback. So if you recall, this program was along the lines of the SBA being the guarantor, not the actual lender, which create all kinds of problems, but it helped create some liquidity, supposedly, in freeing up some dollars to be lent to PPP borrowers. But statistically, they, to date, as of a couple of days ago, the SBA has purchased about 127,000 non-performing loans. So that's doubled since July. In July, it was 3.3 billion, so about $51,000 per loan. And so the article then goes into talking about that this is still a small percentage, but it's demonstrating a trend of the SBA having to step in and pay the lenders on the guarantee because there are defaults. It says about 91% of the PPP loans have been forgiven or partially forgiven, and it goes into the statistics about the numbers that have been lent and paid and everything else. But so hopefully you're able to repay your PPP loan. There is still, as we talked about, as expected, not that we had a crystal ball at the time, but a lot of lawsuits related to lending, related to forgiveness. There is an admission in here that part of the problem is that the rules were ever changing. And if you go back and listen to, or you listened to at the time, our discussions, it was, we would say one thing on one week, and then when we were doing them 2 a week, we'd say one thing on Tuesday, and then Thursday say, yeah, disregard what we said 48 hours ago because they changed it again. And they tried to put out frequently asked question sheets and everything else. So, at least they're acknowledging that they are part of the screw up in the whole process. And then last week we talked about employee retention a little bit, and there was an article that came out, tips for managers and leaders suffering from, they call it productivity paranoia, meaning their productivity is down and they're afraid it's linked to not having the number of workers they need, or even the right workers that they need. And so some of the things we talked about and reiterate: ensure your employees have resources they need to do their jobs effectively. Set clear expectations for what you expect employees to accomplish each day or week. Provide adequate training so they have the skills and knowledge. Hold workers accountable for their performance. Provide feedback regularly so employees know what they're doing well and what they need to improve. I think that's the biggest issue. And I think it's just kind of human nature. We don't want to confront people that are not doing exactly what we do, and then we deal with it reactively. We do that as consumers. If we go somewhere and we get bad service at a restaurant, we may not go back to that restaurant, but the restaurant tour may not even know that there was an issue. And then there's the opposite extreme, that the person who makes a big deal out of everything and wants the perfect meal in these days of being short-staffed. Again, provide feedback, reward employees. We talked about that. It doesn't necessarily have to be financial rewards. It could be non-financial rewards. And then talk to your employees to get the feedback. And then lastly, the random news of the day is that this was actually in the Wall Street Journal, in the personal journal section, that and this is, we're outside or beyond the season that this may be relevant, except if you go to Scarowinds in the next couple of weeks and ride roller coasters. But the article is roller coaster thrills trigger false crash alerts. So OnStar may be calling you and finding out if you're okay. It may activate the blinker lights on your car that's in the parking lot, actually, because I think that's how that works. And so just be aware of that you may get that random phone call, and so don't panic that someone has probably not crashed into your car. It's just that you have come to an abrupt stop on the Terminator. What is it? The not Terminator. What is
Thunder Road?
It's Thunder Road, but what is the race car one at Carowinds? What is Earnhardt's nickname? Why can't I think of that?
Intimidator.
Okay. Intimidator. Yes. Okay. I was going to give out a coffee card, but you're not getting one. So anyway, there you go.
I don't drink coffee.
Okay. There you go. So there is your list of current events.
Hey, real quick question before we jump into cybersecurity. Robert Mayetta said on that PPP, default rate and all that, did that also include EIDL, or was that specifically just naming PPP?
It was specific to PPP, so I don't have the statistics on EIDL, but I do know that there is discussion on the federal level about how that is working, and are they going to put more money into it? Are they going to continue certain programs and things like that? So that is a topic of discussion, whereas PPP is history. They're not going to infuse any money into the economy like they did with that program, at least under the PPP. There are still, I would say, if people are looking for money and assistance, there are still foundations out there that are providing assistance and understanding that, okay, this was a Band-Aid, and that people are, still suffering as far as business revenue goes and getting back to. I was walking through Overstreet Mall yesterday to get to the other side of town, and I had not realized how many businesses are still dark, how many vacant spaces there are along those corridors. And then I'm thinking it's lunchtime-ish. Where are all the people? So a lot of people still not coming back to work yet, working remote. So all those things we've talked about the evolution of what the workplace looks like, still appear to continue onward, which is a mixed hybrid. Maybe more people still working from home. Uptown is getting a little more crowded, but not the way it was prior to COVID, where it felt like a thriving city to walk around at Trade and Tryon at lunchtime.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going back, and everything that we keep hearing, hybrid is kind of here to stay unless that industry just doesn't yield itself to it. So Adam is off today, if you haven't noticed, so that's okay. We've got he would like to geek out and wears Captain Kirk shirt about the Starship and everything having to do with cybersecurity, but we got actually experts on here. So Evan Taylor and Aaron Bock. And Evan, I'm going to have kind of introduce you first. I want to have you talk a little bit about what you did at the FBI, what you're doing now in the world of cybersecurity and helping businesses, and trends that you are seeing, what you saw back when you were with the Bureau, but then also what's happened since then. And then we'll kick it over to Aaron.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. It's good to be with everybody. Thanks for dialing in for the for the gathering here. So, yeah, my name is Evan Taylor, and I was in the FBI for about 6 years, and I did predominantly national security and cyber investigations. And I left the bureau in 2014 to get into the private sector and got in the insurance business. So now a lot of the conversations I have with clients are around insurance, transferring risk, and a lot of those conversations are around cyber liability insurance amongst other forms of insurance. And so by virtue of just my background and having seen a lot of breaches and experienced a lot of breaches, I still get a lot of calls. I mean, I had a call this morning from an organization that had a pretty suspicious event occur overnight, and they're kind of caught on their heels saying, how do we deal with it? And so a lot of the conversations we're having around risk, how to manage the risk outside of insurance. So things like, hey, our people, our process, our technology, what do we need to be thinking about ahead of an attack? And then what happens during and after an attack? What I'll say from a macro standpoint in the market is in the 2010, 11, 12, and when I was living in this world every day, we saw a lot of state-sponsored intrusions, so nation-state actors, which we still see a lot of. So a lot of China and Russia and Iran, and so a lot of this is intellectual property theft driven. It's economic espionage driven. So how can those countries build their national infrastructure across industry by stealing R&D and blueprints and IP from the U.S. From our businesses instead of investing it in their own businesses themselves? But what has exploded is true cyber crime, and I'd say it's organized criminal enterprises that are conducting these attacks, and they're for financial gain. So these attackers are run like the gangs of the U.S. in the 1910s and 20s. They have fluent English speakers. They have malware developers. They have money mule networks that they recruited with thousands of victims in the U.S. unbeknownst to them that are wiring money out for cyber criminals overseas. And so, unfortunately, the problem has gotten worse. And I think businesses are more in tune and adept to the threat than they were maybe 10 years ago. But we still have a long way to go. The cyber, just as a general benchmark, the cyber insurance business, so transferring the risk to an insurance carrier as a company, we may have had 10 to 15% market saturation across every business, small, mid-sized business, large caps, publicly traded companies, et cetera, 10 plus years ago. We probably haven't crested, the high 20s or 30%. I mean, there's a lot of businesses that either choose not to insure it, they don't even know that they can purchase insurance, or worse yet, they don't even understand that they have a problem. And those are unfortunately some of the most devastating calls you get are, hey, we just tried to open our email server and or our emails, and we've got a screen saying we owe $500,000 in Bitcoin. We don't even know what we're looking at. That's a very reactive position that you don't want to be put in. And so a lot of the conversations we're having with companies are how to prepare for that ahead of time, so it's not as devastating as it can be. So I'll pause there, and you can take it where you'd like, Gary.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. Everybody that's on here, and thank you, Robert. Yes, the chat has been enabled. You are channeling Papa Joe today. So that you guys can harass us all you want on the chat, but do hit us up with questions, because it's rarely that we have people like this that have deep expertise in this kind of world on here. And so you get some free advice from some really good experts on something that's a real deal. I think I mentioned it recently, but a turnaround that I did, insulating glass manufacturing company, they do the glass sandwiches for the Simonton windows, et cetera. They got hit twice in the last 18 months with ransomware. The first one was kind of a trial balloon, and it was still hundreds of thousands of dollars. The second time it hit that hit them, and they had a whole bunch of antiquated systems, AS400 and all kinds of things that they were running on their manufacturing line. They got hit again for millions of dollars. And I think they had $1 million policy. That was it. So they had to cough up more than that. And not only were they down for a week, they had this cascading effect on at least a dozen other big companies that were depending on just-in-time delivery of those glass sandwiches so they could make windows because everybody was buying windows because of the pandemic. The ripple effect is massive. And if you want to talk about litigious, that's why we have Jack Centinello. He's not a litigator, but I mean, good grief. I mean, it's terrifying. I mean, it's just terrifying. So Evan, one thing that I do want you to think about, you don't answer yet because I'm going to kick it over to Aaron, but Evan, if you would think about like, okay, so you get that black screen, hey, you owe us this if you want anything back. What the heck do you do? Even if you've got insurance or if you don't, so think about that. We'll go expand on that. Aaron Bock. So Robert Mayetta guessed what's the rest of your shirt. You could stand up and show it. They won't see it until you talk. But so when you talk, you can do that. But give the listeners an overview of how you guys tie into cybersecurity, what you guys do. Their company is very unique and very interesting, quite frankly. So Aaron, take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gary. And for the listeners who obviously couldn't see me, I was holding up my shirt, not realizing I wasn't on there. So the shirt says, "Tell me you didn't click the link." You can't talk about cybersecurity as on my side of the table without wearing, I think, a cool T-shirt. If I'm working with all these cyber insurance or cyber security vendors. So, anyways, Aaron Bock, managing partner of Opkalla, based here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We do a lot of work in the cybersecurity space. Our business is kind of unique, like Gary said. We kind of go across two different industries: traditional telco and networking, along with the traditional reseller that you work with for IT. But customers call us. Our goal is to be the first call for any IT problem that a customer has, whether that's a CFO, a CIO, a CTO, a CISO, et cetera. But be the first call. And we get a lot of calls. Hey, this just happened, or, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do I do? And I guess something that I would say, Gary asked Evan, what are the trends with kind of cyber crimes? I would say the trend in the cybersecurity solutions that are being put in place to prevent these crimes, that there is so many options out there now for tools and services that it's so confusing to the end user. What do they do? What are they addressing? What are they good at? I'm going to use some acronyms and I'll define these, but just in security alone, if you look at there's these graphs out there that kind of lay out vendors by different categories. If you have like a 90-inch monitor, it's still like pin size because there's so many vendors. And so there's XDR and MDR and EDR and NDR. And it's like, what do these all mean? What do I need? And so I would say that the trend, and if I can define those later if you want, but the trend is that there's way more options because security is becoming such an important thing for companies that, all of these folks that have been in Silicon Valley are spinning up companies and coming up with these products to address it. Now, that's what our company does, is helping people figure out like why one of these vendors, when should I engage them? How do I engage them? What's the right time, budget? The other trend that I would say that is really tough with what's going on in security right now, Evan said, more people are concerned about this because it's on the news every day. You're hearing about another company every time you turn around, someone got breached. So one is, just like he said, it's not just nation states. Something he didn't mention, hacker for hire. You can basically go on the black market and buy code to hack now as like a service. So like basically do bad stuff as a service, which is sad, but that's what we're dealing with. So it's a lot easier to be a hacker, if you want to call it. But so we constantly have customers, large and small, say, why us? Like, why go after, like you mentioned, the window insulator manufacturer, like why them? What do they have that, like, why wouldn't the person go after Bank of America? It's because it's what they can get to. It's not because it's targeting specifically them. They're scanning across multiple different networks. They're going to the lowest hanging fruit. And if you happen to be that, then that's why they're going to go after you. So, we're seeing some people will come to us and say, they're going to go after millions of dollars. They're not going to go after us. Well, they will go after you for 100,000 if that's what they can get. And so that trend is scary because there's no one that is really safe. And then I would say that, like right now, the other thing that's really tough for organizations is that if you look at all of the things in IT that have ever happened in the past, your infrastructure, your network, your telephony, it's always been like, what's the ROI on it? Because, we're going to put in more infrastructure so we can process more data, so we can support customers faster. Security is one of the first areas where it's really hard to put an ROI on purchasing and buying and having a good security posture. And so I think it's a really tough sell internally unless you have, your CEO and your board really engaged and really wanting to have a better security posture. What Evan talked about, cyber insurance, is driving a lot of that because the premiums are going up so much because of all these breaches. But those three things are very common trends we're seeing in the cybersecurity vendor space right now. Gary, I'll go back to you.
No, that's good stuff. So, all right, you guys, Q&A, the way that you know that it's the Q&A button is it has a Q and an A by it. So it's at the bottom. If you want to hit us up with questions, hit us there. But I'm going to go back to you, Evan. So you got hit. What should you do and what do most people do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. So I'm gonna answer that indirectly and also directly. I mean, you get hit very directly, kind of like a gunshot wound. Like if you have a gunshot wound, you need a medic. Somebody's got to stop the bleeding, and you can worry about rehab and PT and occupational. You can worry about that later. Right now, we got to stop the gunshot, stop the bleeding from the gunshot. And so the host of folks that do that are digital forensic incident response firms. And these are companies that show up right after the gunshot, right after the attack, and they say, okay, we need to figure out, when did the attacker get on the network? What did they take? How long have they been on the network? Here's what's kind of scary. Over the last 2 to 3 years, I've had a lot of companies, clients or prospective clients call me and say, hey, we just had a ransomware attack. They're asking for an extortion demand. And once the incident response firm does their work, they actually tell them, hey, they've actually been on your network for 18 months. They stole all your W-2 data and filed fraudulent tax returns on all your employees last year, and they wired all that money out of the country. They've already stolen your intellectual property, and they've sold it on the dark web. They've done this, they've done this, they've done this. This ransomware attack is actually on their way out the door as a final way to monetize the breach that they did 18 months ago. And so an incident response firm kind of gives you the broader context so that you can make informed decisions. You might have payment card data that was stolen that you're legally obligated to notify those victims, give them credit monitoring services. You might have HIPAA data, and now you've got HIPAA fines and regulatory bodies that you got to respond to. So that incident response provider is critical. I would say caution. A lot of companies have an IT, like an outside IT provider we call managed service providers. I see a lot of companies rely on that MSP to be their cybersecurity vendor, and many are ill-equipped to do that. So not all, there are some that are equipped to do that, but I would say folks like Aaron are very equipped to tell you if you are partnered correctly with the right MSP that can do both of those things or not. But the really bad time to know that is right after an attack and you're trying to vet whether you have the right vendor base. So I'm actually going to do something really quick, Gary, because I think it's helpful. Yeah, I do a lot of presentations on this topic, and are you seeing, like I got multiple screens up here. Are you seeing my email or are you seeing a PDF?
No, we're seeing risk management considerations.
Okay. So I would tell folks on this call, whether you own the company, run the IT risk within the company, there are 3 buckets. There's people, process, technology. So thinking about, hey, people, we have employees, we have customers, we have internal IT resources, external IT resources like an MSP. Obviously, we need to train people not to click on things they shouldn't click on. We need to make sure that our vendor base is correct. We're correctly aligned with the right vendors. So the people is a critical piece of this. The process piece is also critical. So I see a lot of companies falling victim to fraudulent wire transfers, where an attacker will send an email to sweet Aunt Susie who runs AP and the owners, in the Caribbean, and they say, hey, our key supplier changed their banking relationship, send the wire here instead of where it normally goes. And she sends a $300,000 wire out, and it takes a week to figure out that went to an attacker. That happens all the time. So what processes do we have around wire transfer processes and controls, incident response planning, et cetera? And then the technology piece obviously is critical. I see a lot of companies spending a lot more time and attention and resource and money on assessing their technology frameworks, hardware, software, et cetera, and building a roadmap of where they're going in the next 1, 3, 5 years, to think smart about their IT spend. And that's critical. I mean, if you're doing it reactively, you're probably going to be the next victim. So that was a long and short-winded way of answering your question. I talk about incident response firms, Gary. I think the other critical partnership is your data breach counsel. And I don't just say that because Jack and Schumacher and their team are on the line. That data breach attorney and your privacy counsel, I see a lot of companies that they may partner with a local law firm for contracts and employment law issues, but you need a data breach attorney. That's all they do all day, every day. They can actually give you a lot of protected privilege in your communication, so you're not subject to discovery on all the things that happened after the attack. But that would be a second and super critical partnership to make sure you have correct out of the gate. So
that is super duper helpful. That is a technical term, super duper. So, but as far as you'd mentioned early, digital forensic firms, is that what you said? Is that right? Digital forensic firms? Like, how do you find these people? Like, and how, again, navigating quickly, you got hit with a gunshot wound. You don't need, time to go to Angie's List or whatever. Like, how do you find credible people in this world?
Gary, do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
So I'll answer that question, and I see a couple questions in the Q&A that I could weigh in on as well. But I think the first thing, like Evan said, so it's DFIR, digital forensics. That's the short term you'll see for them. They are very important, and it's important to engage them before this happens. And hopefully it never does, but it's really good to engage them and have a relationship with someone before. So I would say first place to start is look at your insurance policy that you currently have, if you have a cyber insurance policy, and see if there are requirements or there's a relationship that's already kind of predefined in that cyber insurance policy that says this is who we would approve of, use, et cetera, in the incident response process. Evan can probably speak to that as well and weigh in. But I would say sometimes what we see is I've had a customer who got hit with I won't even call it really a breach. It was really a phishing, a spoofing email, like you said, send these wire transfers, et cetera. They engaged with an IR company. It wasn't an approved company. The insurance provider wouldn't pay for it, and so they preferred them to use someone else. So I would say start with your insurance carrier. There are some very well-known national DFIR companies, and a lot of times, and this kind of goes along with one of the trends we're seeing, these guys are partnered with some popular technologies that are in cyber insurance questionnaires. So for example, I'll give you kind of a relationship that we've seen pop up recently that I think is helpful for customers because it gives you another layer. But the co-insurance, so a lot of the tools that you're providing now or you're putting in place to prevent potential cyber issues, they're also offering some sort of co-insurance. And so like, for example, Tetra is a very popular DFIR company for, I'd say, mid-size and enterprise companies. They have been purchased by Arctic Wolf, who is a managed detection response vendor. If you use Arctic Wolf for managed detection response, then you can get a $0 IR retainer with Tetra. That's just an example. I'm not endorsing them as something you should use, but that's a really good way of saying, all right, hey, I've got a relationship before anything happens with a DFIR company, but then I'm also putting in other tools that will address some of that risk. I think the co-insurance is huge. The more co-insurance that you can get from different tools, EDR is something that's popular in insurance questionnaires. That's endpoint detection response. That's what's put on all of your laptops, desktops, et cetera, that can shut down a potential, weird issue that's happening in quarantine devices that will help prevent breaches. They offer $500,000, $1 million insurance, co-insurance policies to your cyber insurance. It kind of goes hand in hand, and Evan, you might be able to speak to this here in a second, but the cyber insurance questionnaire, in order to qualify for cyber insurance, they're actually not only suggesting, they're sort of mandating now that some of these tools are in place. And so it's good to have the tools because it helps prevent the risk, but it also helps with when you do have a breach or you do have something that happens, because it is almost impossible to 100% prevent it, that these guys will also kick in coverage on top of your cyber insurance policy. And I don't know, Evan, if you want to add to that, because there was a lot there.
Yeah. So I do. I think again, I'm only showing this because I think it's helpful and I'm a visual learner. This screen, so there's a lot more conversation today than there was even 3-4 years ago in businesses about, hey, all right, we're going to spend money on IT and IT security. As it pertains to cybersecurity, where do I need to be spending money? I'm in the insurance business. I can only speak to where are carriers focused from a cyber insurance standpoint on the controls. And this is kind of the 4 big buckets that they're focusing on. Multi-factor authentication is critical. This has been a hyper focus over the last 2 years, and this is across your system for remote access to a network, privileged accounts like administrator users, et cetera. Endpoint detection response is becoming the new hot item, which I think we'll see over the next year to 2 is going to be mandated. A lot of conversations on backup strategies. Do you encrypt your backups? Do you test your backups? Where are your backups stored? Are they stored on site? Are they in the cloud? There was a question in the chat that I answered around privileged access management. So what are we doing to make sure that not everyone has access across the entire network? We can easily turn access on, turn it off. And then how are we training our employees? So I think looking at this from a macro sort of strategic standpoint, you can't just implement all this stuff. It's really expensive. But how you do it in a way that's thoughtful and that's planned and strategic moving forward across the business. I do want to answer, Andrew Tucker had a question. He said companies need cyber insurance, but how often do insurance companies pay out and how helpful is coverage in getting a company back up and running? So really good question. I have seen more claims paid out than not paid out. And I would say, Andrew, the issue, the one type of claim that I see consistently declined is companies wiring money to an attacker via a fraudulent wire transfer when they think it's going to the correct supplier, whoever it is. Generally, the carriers have been burned by those types of claims so much that generally they have put, like Beasley, for instance, is a big cyber carrier. Beasley about 4 years ago put what's called an out-of-band authentication requirement in their policy. So they said, hey, if Andrew's AP man, woman, gets an email from Andrew saying, send this money to this key supplier, and they do it, and they don't verify the wire change, particularly they don't verify it outside the same communication mechanism. So you don't want to just email the attacker back thinking it's Andrew and going, Andrew, is this really you? If so, I'll send the wire out. You want to call them, you want to text them, you want to do something outside of that normal communication method. The carriers have been pretty vigilant about that because they have paid billions in dollars out across the U.S. economy on that. But to answer your question, I mean, how helpful is the coverage in getting a company back up? One of the line items in a cyber policy is data restoration expense. It can be very, very expensive if, let's say, portions of or your entire network are encrypted. How do you restore that data? And I've seen attackers destroy a lot of data on the way out because maybe they didn't achieve what they were hoping to accomplish. The carriers have data restoration providers. Those DFIR firms, honestly, are doing a lot of data restoration work to restore data. So, I mean, I've had $8, $9, $10 million claims paid out in cyber. So I'm pretty bullish on the carriers. It's where we see companies get jammed up, or companies buy cyber insurance and they think it's their end-all solution to the cybersecurity problem, and that's generally where companies are going to get jammed up, because they haven't invested in anything else around IT security. They haven't educated users, and a lot of it is education from the broker, people like me, to go, hey, here's what this does, here's what this doesn't do, and if you have issues, here's the issues in the policy that you might encounter. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful on both counts. I think, and Evan would probably agree, but the quality of the insurance provider matters. It doesn't matter when you're paying your premiums, but it matters when you have a claim. And I'll say that again, it matters when you have a claim. So do your due diligence on that. And the other thing that I would say, the reason I love having Aaron and Opkalla on here is they get paid. They don't get paid by a business to come in and do an assessment and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they get paid by the solution provider. So they are completely agnostic on what's the right solution. We've used them to come in and help us like try to navigate what cloud solution versus we've had our own servers, all that kind of stuff. And it's really helpful when you've got somebody that's been in the business for a long time, understands it, and they have a completely solution neutral approach, and their vested interest is getting you the right thing and helping you navigate and avoid the beauty pageant of having to sit through umpteen sales presentations with wonderfully trained salespeople that are designed to sell you their product, not necessarily the best product. So for your specific thing. So it is really like you should know Opkalla, like look them up on the web, put them on your bookmark and your speed dial. And you should also know somebody like Evan Taylor with NFP. And this isn't just a plug for NFP or anything, but it's like have somebody that knows what the heck they're doing. And I'm glad that you also brought this up on this data breach council. Yeah, you better have a specialist. You don't want to go to your general practitioner if you're going to have brain surgery. You need to have somebody that does, like the vein guy. I do veins all day, every day. That's all I do, veins. All right, great. That's what you need. So anyway, great
And
question.
Gary,
Andrew.
I would agree with that as well. I mean, I've been very fortunate and I've been a nerd since I was in grade school. So I really like technology and, so I'm like, when IT is not available in our office, it's like, oh, just ask Jack. And usually when I have a problem, it's like, have you done this? And now I've trained our IT people to get to the level 4 assistance, because I've already done the first 3 levels and trying to figure it out myself. So, but we do have specialists down in our Sarasota office because we were seeing this happen. And we just had some expertise already in the technology space. And then so as this continued to develop years ago, and we were seeing how the infiltration works, and there was some discussion about that where it generally starts at lower levels, and they are very patient. And they're shooting for the top, but the criminals will be very patient and wait for that opportunity where someone just clicks something because they weren't paying attention, and then they're in. And then they wait patiently until the next person that they reach in the organization. And so just imagine people climbing stairs to literally different floors in an organization until they get up to the top, and then they start wreaking havoc. It doesn't happen always that way, but it seems to be a very pattern behavior. And that's why, as Evan and Aaron have said, that a lot of times when it's discovered, it's not something that just happened last week or 2 weeks ago. It's something that's been ongoing in the organization for a long period of time, and they're getting more sophisticated. We've talked about this over the 100+ weeks of doing this occasionally, that the elaborate scams and schemes, like now the most recent one is with employment and posting. And this is something that's gone on for a while, but it just seems like it's becoming more prevalent these days, or at least the news is picking it up, that you reply to fake job postings, and then they give you all kinds of information. You're giving them all kinds of information, including potentially access to your computer. In one case, it was, oh, we'll ship you a computer that is preloaded with all of our stuff on it, and then you pay for it, and then we'll pay you back for it, kind of thing. But pay us, we will ship it to you. You pay for it, or you pay us through our portal, which is controlled by them. So again, elaborate schemes, but it is important to. I don't touch this stuff. I send it down to Sarasota, because it is just they have the knowledge and the experience to know where to look and how to handle. As you might imagine, when someone discovers this, it's their hair is on fire. And so what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And these guys on the line are trained to know what to do, and legal counsel, and then obviously forensic accounting and all those things that go into the process of finding out and trying to get that money back. But our IT people put together elaborate schemes to try to trick us. I think I mentioned that before, that I got taken and then got that. It wasn't as bad. I imagine that if I were to get caught, it'd be like this red skull, fiery skull that shows up on my screen. It's like, haha, gotcha. It wasn't that bad, but it was, I felt that bad internally, like that, okay, I fell for it. And then I called my IT guy. I'm like, that's not funny. And like, And then I got the video link, or the link to the video for our cybersecurity awareness video, pretty within about 10 minutes after having clicked that. So anyway.
Hey, Gary, can I say one thing? So just,
Yeah.
What Jack just said is very real. I'll tell a funny story. We have a customer who actually, it's called a phishing campaign. You can simulate, phishing for your employees. And if you need suggestions on that, just give me, find me on LinkedIn and we can help. But one of our customers actually simulated a phishing attack by saying, "This is a phishing email. Please do not click this. Click here to confirm receipt." And it's amazing how many people in the organization clicked it in a 2,000 person organization. So, they don't have to be elaborate. I think we think of like these Russian guys in like bomb shelters, like in East Russia, like hacking into crazy networks. These are people who are just sending sometimes funny emails with random links. One thing I do want to say on this topic, the one thing that when you start talking about cybersecurity, it's like doomsday always comes out. It's always the worst case scenario. For the folks out there listening, and for this, there's a lot of business owners who are probably like, holy hell, like, what do I do next? This is very daunting. You can't 100% prevent a cyber attack. You never can. That's because you could do 100% of the stuff right, and then someone you work with, a supplier, may not do that, and now you're at risk because you work with them. But Evan showed his slide, and I think that's important. If you can address some of the main areas, Andrew's question around, do cyber insurance providers pay out? Does it help me get back up and running? Evan answered the payout question. Does it help you get back up and running? Sure. If you got a ransom, you pay it, you get back up and running. Theoretically, you are, but you're still at risk because they could still be in your network, to what Jack said. And so if you just go proactively and say, look, we're going to take a backup. We're going to have a backup that goes to another site, and we're going to have a tertiary backup that goes off of our network that's secured, that we can't touch. That will solve a ton of your problems. And it's not that expensive. A lot of you use Google or Microsoft for your email platforms. Within those platforms, there's a lot of built-in tools, use cases that you can use that are not that expensive. I think that's the one thing that scares everyone about cybersecurity, is that everything costs a gazillion dollars. For a small business or a medium-sized business, within the Microsoft suite, you can do a lot of what we're talking about without buying a tool ever, or you can add on a pretty inexpensive license to address it. So I would say focus on like MFA, like what Evan said. have an MFA in place and just do not negotiate. I know people say it slows you down. It makes things annoying for you to have to log in. Who cares? It prevents breaches, and it makes it so that you have to authorize from a secondary device. It's really important. EDR, which is what you put on the laptops at the end. If you have employees that travel in an airport or a hotel and log into the Wi-Fi, highly recommend putting EDR in your environment, because it's going to stop a lot of the attacks right there at that laptop, so it doesn't affect the rest of your company. Backups. Can't emphasize that enough. If you don't have backups, do that. Like, that will prevent you not only from a cyber breach, but if you have an employee who's disgruntled, who wants to delete a lot of your files, backups will help with that. They'll help with any weather events or any, crazy outages. So backups are really important. So my point is that it doesn't always cost a lot of money. It doesn't always, it's not all negative. You can prevent a lot of this by training and things like that. And you can still do everything right and still get attacked. It's just, how can you recover? So to Andrew's question, I think take the proactive measures so that you can ensure you can get back up and running. Cyber insurance is just another thing that will help you in the case that it gets to the point where you have a ransom. And I think proactive, and then try to do something to improve your posture, every year, every quarter, every year, take an assessment. And I think you can do a lot to prevent cyber attacks.
Jack, you have raised your hand.
I have raised my hand electronically. So yeah, I was thinking about what you said about being on the road, and I am a little bit academically lazy in a sense that my IT group has been assertive in we have a VPN, so I can get onto the hotel Wi-Fi and then go through the VPN, whether I'm on my phone, my iPad, or my computer. But what would be your recommendation as far as even a vendor or a product that people could use that is maybe not as expensive, that they can create a layer, maybe just explaining what a VPN is as far as what it's doing? And then is it, maybe some suggestions on how, at least initially, someone can go today, this afternoon, and start the protection process by at least doing that.
You're putting me on the spot, but I love it. Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with a VPN, it's a virtual private network. It essentially, if you have a firewall with a lot of rules inside your organization to protect you from, if someone's on your, let's just say someone's in your office, if they log into your internet and they log into the network, you're not concerned about where they go, because you have a lot of rules in place to ensure that they don't go click on things they shouldn't or engage with, websites they shouldn't. The VPN is essentially extending that to wherever your employee may be. So if I'm in a hotel or if I'm in an airport, if I want to access a sensitive application that I'm housing behind a firewall inside of my office or inside my data center, they have to actually log into our network. One thing I will say is that I don't know the stats for sure. I know email breaches are for sure the highest population of breaches. VPN breaches are very high up there, though. VPN there's a lot of weak spots along the way, and I don't want to say that to scare everyone, but what I would say is right now, the secure edge, the zero trust, those are a couple trends that we're seeing. So I'll throw out a couple names: Cato Networks, Zscaler. You've got Cloudflare, Akamai, Palo Alto, Cisco, they're all out there doing some sort of zero trust. You might hear it called ZTNA or SSE or SASE, secure edge. Those are kind of where a lot of people are going. To answer that question properly, I would say reach out and let's have a conversation about your organization. Like if your organization is 100% on a server that's sitting in your office, you're very different than that organization that has 100% of their data in a, Google Cloud or Amazon Cloud or Azure Cloud. So it just depends on how you're set up, because you may need a different technology than someone else. And so it's not a one size fits all. Jack, I guess to answer your question, if you don't have a firewall, like if you have a server, for example, in your office, you don't have a firewall set up, I mean, that's the most basic. That's security like 5-10 years ago. Most people have that, but if they don't, you can get that from your internet carriers. You get that from managed service providers. That's where you can set up a VPN, or you can engage with, other software and technology to set that up, aside from that. And then I would say, like, really, if you don't really have that answered, you probably should engage a cybersecurity professional to do some sort of an assessment to say, where are we lacking? And if you don't feel like paying someone to do that, take the cyber insurance questionnaire that someone like Evan would give you, and see if you can answer confidently yes to all those questions. If you can, then I feel a lot better about your cyber insurance posture or cyber security posture. If you answer those yes, but in the background you're crossing your fingers or you're lying to yourself, then I don't feel so great for you. And I think you should really be proactive and start addressing those things. And that's, I hate to give like it depends answer, but it kind of does depend depending on your organization.
So Evan, any chance that you could send me a PDF of a few of those slides that you find really beneficial? Because what I can do is I can disseminate that to everybody that's on the call, people that have registered that I know would find that helpful. If you'd be willing to do it, we'll disseminate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I'll shoot it out. And then there's also kind of a state of the cyber insurance slide. Unfortunately, it's not a good state. There's a lot of breaches and a lot of claims, and so it's caused a lot of disruption in the market. It's the youngest form of insurance, commercial insurance. So the carriers are in a state of kind of knee-jerk reacting, and it's getting more expensive and more restrictive. And so I'll include that as well.
Okay, cool.
And I think as we wrap up, I just want to endorse Aaron and what they do. I mean, we just had a call with a several thousand employee company of mine, and I think what they do great, just to dilute it down to brass tacks, they're IT directors, people that manage IT infrastructure and spend and cost. They're understaffed, they're under-resourced, they're underfunded, and they're sold to by providers, software providers, hardware providers, et cetera. And they take a lot of that noise off the table and help people think strategically about how to spend the dollars that they do have. And so, again, I would just endorse a conversation with Aaron. I think is nothing but additive to wherever your organization is today. So.
Yeah, I agree. You guys have been great to deal with on both cases. We do work with both of these companies. We can endorse the quality and character of these people on here right now, especially Jack is questionable, but he's still on here. And one other thing, so I know Aaron was doing some geek speak on MFA, but what that means is multi-factor authentication. And it does not mean the Morris Fry Agency. It's not the Morris Fry Agency. It's no longer around. So anyway, next week, we are going to be dealing with enjoying or just riding roller coaster markets. So Jack, you're timely in your theme here, the last little tidbit that you have, but riding roller coaster markets and not losing your lunch. So Ben McDonald, co-host with me on the Anything But Typical podcast, will be kind of subject matter expert in the hot seat next week with Jack and Adam. And I am going to be out with a friend from South Africa that's going to be in town. So anyway, that's what's going on. Anybody late that missed some of this stuff on the front end, we will put it up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon. And we sure appreciate you guys taking time. Good questions. Again, congratulations to Robert Mayetta, Andrew, and everybody else that asked questions. Thank you. Evan, thank you again for taking the time. Same way with you, Aaron. We really appreciate it. Jack, always good to see you. As Paul Harvey said, good day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.